Welcome to Unbreak Marketing. I've got Dan and Brian here from Big Leap. Super excited to have them talk about SEO, how you could tell if it's broken in your particular marketing or go-to-market engine, ways that you could fix it. So first, Dan, Brian, let me let you guys kick off by just giving a quick introduction to your background.
Yeah, I'm Brian. I'm the founder and CEO of Big Leap. I started Big Leap in 2008, but been in the SEO world for almost, I guess, 20 years this year. So been going back, just love to figure things out and tinker around. That's how I got started. So I built my own websites, drove traffic to them through SEO, and then ultimately started helping others do that with their own websites.
I thought I was going to be a dentist, so I don't know how that path changes, but from dentist to digital marketer, ended up realizing science, not my thing. People and solving problems, that works for me. I just really enjoyed the digital marketing space and problem solving and just treating people well and figuring out what do you actually need and can we help with that or
Yeah.
not. And you fast forward and now it's been 10-ish years working with Brian doing this together and another 7 years before that, just learning the space. So it's been a fun career. Not pulling teeth like I thought it was going to be, but it's been fun the last 17 years.
One of the reasons I had you two on is because I've heard really good stories from your clients and those who have worked with you. And that's really the best thing that you can say about someone in SEO is, hey, their clients like them and feel like they're successful with them. So I'm going to kick this discussion off with a quick question of, if someone is listening to this, how would they know if their SEO is not really working the way it should? What would be those warning signs that would say, something needs to be optimized or fixed here?
What we hear a lot is it used to be wonderful working with fill in the blank, this group, and we've actually been working with them for 7 years, but they've had seven different relations. But in the first 5 years, it was great. And now we've had four different account managers in the last 6 months, and they don't know who we are. I feel like we have to re-explain ourselves every time what we do, and have to re-educate them on our business, and it's just not the same as what it was. So we hear that a lot. It used to be great, and now it feels like we're on set it and forget it.
Yeah.
So that's more on the people side, not even necessarily the metrics or the results, but that is something we hear a lot. So if you're experiencing that, and it's like, hey, it used to be great, and now I feel like we're on set it and forget it mode, you're not
Yeah.
alone. That definitely happens quite a bit these days.
I think on the performance side, if you're have been doing SEO a long time, like Dan talked about, I don't think this is the norm, unfortunately, but hopefully, you should have a good history of metrics, whatever those are, whether that's what you track internally or maybe what an agency's tracked for you. So we look at kind of leading and lagging metrics, right? There's things like rankings and even traffic, but at the end of the day, those of course don't pay the bills. And so we try to focus a lot more on the conversion side and just make sure it's driving business. And so a lot of people don't even know actually where their leads come from, whether it's SEO or direct traffic or paid. And so that's one of the things we've focused a lot on the last couple of years is not even maybe starting with SEO, but starting with how do you understand where your traffic's coming from, where business is coming from, and what's turning into sales at the end of the day. And so we try to focus on that a little bit more up front to make sure, first of all, people know that, and then we can
Mhm.
actually answer that question of how is your SEO performing and how is it trending over time.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned conversions because in the end, that's why people generally do SEO. They're like, well, we want to get more of these conversions, whatever that conversion looks like for your organization. And so it used to be people thought of traffic and search ranking rate, what place you were in Google. But really, in the end, it comes down to, are you achieving those business goals through your SEO? So I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Just because we're all smart enough and self-aware enough, hopefully the three of us on this call and people listening to know there's no marketing leader who's waking up in the morning going like, it's a good day. I'm so excited to go interview 7 new SEO agencies because I really want to talk about traffic increases and metrics. Nobody wants to do that, right? So
Yeah.
it's more about outcomes, what's actually happening.
That brings me to our next question, which is simply, all right, somebody may have heard what you said and it resonated. They said, yeah, we've got some of those problems. What is the cost of the staying with the status quo? In other words, not fixing the fact that you're constantly changing account managers, not fixing the fact that you don't know where your leads are coming from or that you're not getting conversions from all the traffic that you're getting. What's that cost look like?
Opportunity cost is always what? It's like the next best thing you gave up, right? It's whatever you gave up by not choosing the other option. Just a recent example that pops into mind, and I'm sure maybe Brian will have a different thought here, is just we work with a group that sells chairs and tables. And this isn't like, hey, a random consumer is going to go, hey, I really want one chair. It's more that they're selling to buildings. They're selling to churches. They're selling to, it's B2B. And so when they sell a bunch of round tables and chairs, it's a $15,000 to $20,000 average order size. And prior to coming over to us for the previous number of years, they'd sell anywhere from 150 to 200 orders worth $15,000 to $20,000 on their site. Well, what's the opportunity cost of that? It was $15,000 times 150 orders. It's over $2 million. It's a good amount of money, right? What could it be? And I think it's nice if you can find an honest group to just kind of ask them, hey, do you think things are going well? Do you think that we could do better than this? And that's what happened in this relationship. They said, hey, do you think we could do better? And we took a look at it and said, yeah, you've been really stagnant for a while now. Well, in the last, I think it's year and a half. This last year, they did something like 450 orders instead, through specifically tracked through organic means, through work that we've helped to do with them. Well, yeah, 450 orders versus what they were getting, 150-ish. We're talking about $3-4 million in additional revenues.
I love that you have a calculator on your desk, Dan, that you just did that math on.
Old school, real
There you
calculator,
go.
powered by the
It's on
sun.
your phone. It's on your phone. It's like actual calculator.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's those costs, obviously, again, opportunity and hard to know, right? Like what would happen or wouldn't have happened if you did something. But we even see in that example, they weren't really doing much on the SEO front. But we have most of our clients are, and they have teams allocated to that, right? You have maybe it's writers, designers, marketing directors spending time on there. So not only are you maybe stagnant and not seeing the growth opportunity, how much time and money are you wasting kind of from your own payroll and your own focus on things that could be producing better for you too?
Absolutely. All of those are important. I mean, we often focus on the cost of change, but there's a much bigger cost, I think, in the status quo and just staying the same, or even, slight declines. I know in some of the roles that I've been in where we worked with SEO agencies, and we could actually see a change over, fairly short period of time, maybe 6 months, where we could measure the delta between where we were going previously and where we got to with those changes. And that very much was an opportunity cost that was speculative at the beginning when we engaged with them. But then as you go back, you should be able to measure that delta and say, we feel like we're making money, we're not losing money on this.
Yeah, it doesn't happen too often, but one of our kind of specialties is multi-location groups. So people that have, locations all over the country, and we help them scale local SEO in all those areas. And so we've worked with some who kind of had to prove the model out, I guess, in a sense. And so they'd take 10 locations, and like you said, we'd measure that over the course of 3 or 6 months to see how did those perform compared to the baseline, essentially. Yeah, the control. So it's a great way to do it. If you really need to prove it. Obviously, we've seen it a million times, so we're like, let's just go. Like, why waste 6 months and not do it all? But we totally understand, kind of having to prove it out a little bit first and then scale.
Absolutely. All right, everyone's excited now. They're rubbing their hands together like, all right, so I can identify these problems. I can see why there's definitely a lot to be gained in making a change or examining, my relationship with my current way of doing SEO. What are some of the ways that you see that there are fixes to some of the problems you mentioned, like not good or regular account services, losses in metrics, or maybe not having the right metrics, or conversions, which may be either stagnant or even going down when traffic is going up? What are some of the high-level fixes there that you would say people could look at?
Yeah, we actually wrote a series on our blog called the right client agency fit, because we're not a fit for everybody and not everyone's a fit for us. So I think to answer that question about finding what's the right cadence, it's tough sometimes, but spending that time asking those questions up front, laying out those pain points, and hopefully you're getting those transparent answers. Because a lot of times if you talk to any kind of agency, right, the answer is always yes. And that's usually, and I think in our opinion, kind of a red flag. We try to be pretty clear about just who's a fit and who's a not, and not that everybody is always fits into that exact bucket, but it's even like those things, communication preferences, and how much time that they actually have. They may be just needing someone to take it and run with it and be pretty hands off, which just hasn't worked as well for us. And so we usually require a little bit more interaction, with our team. So yeah, that's one way I think is just spending a little bit more time in that interviewing process, spending your time trying to think through what hasn't worked in the past, what were the pain points you ran into, and ask those questions just right up front.
So asking good questions, first rule of thumb, and trying to find ways to fix that.
What I'd bring up is, if you're like me, I like people being transparent. and building trust with me and not being sneaky. And so many agencies, part of their model is like, how do I get all 8 of my tentacles and wrap you as tightly as possible so you can never leave? And there's reasons why they do that. We get it. Like we see it. Just as people treating other people well, have like a foundational problem with that. It seems frustrating to me, and we experience this all the time where someone's like, okay, I'm not happy anymore. I'd like to switch agencies. And then it's, oh, crap. They actually own my paid search account. They actually own my website. They own this or own this or own this. And so now to try to move from agency A to agency B, it's like, well, we got to recreate the whole website now. Or, hey, they're not letting us take our paid search data. So we got to just Control Alt Delete twice for anyone old enough to remember what that means. And we got to start over again. So my point here is just ask the questions up front as well of, hey, if we create this paid search account, who owns that? Do I own that? Do you own that? Hey, if we're doing this SEO strategy and we have 100 locations and we're using XYZ platform, which you told me about, to help manage those or be able to respond to reviews in one location as opposed to having to go into 100 different Google business profiles, who owns end up having a messy divorce? Or none of us anticipate that, but they happen in today's day and age. So just understanding who owns what, and we're big advocates of, you're paying us, it's yours. We're just helping you facilitate and create, but we want you to be the ones that own that. So that could be another good question to ask in that kind of dating process.
We, on top of that too, we always push people to our prospects that come to us to meet the team they'd be working with eventually at some point. Because at the end of the day, you can love Dan, who's awesome and says all the right things because he's done this a long time. But if you get turned over to the intern, which is kind of a reputation some agencies can have, then it doesn't matter what Dan said at the end of the day. So it's interesting because we don't often have clients ask, some do, but not the majority, ask about the team that they might be working with beforehand. So it's just as important, I think, to talk to and be comfortable with that group as it is the agency. We provide a lot of support and training and resources, of course, to our teams, but they're the kind of boots on the ground with working with our clients.
Absolutely. That's often the case with especially the really big agencies, is they have a great reputation. Usually they'll have a couple of kind of rock star SEO people that work with them. But often, unless you are a huge company, a huge client, you don't get to work directly with the name brand. You get assigned a team that you have no idea who they are. You didn't get any chance to vet them. So yeah, very valid point. Yeah. So if you had someone come to you and said, hey, our problem is our traffic is staying the same or maybe even going up, but our conversions are going down and we're not changing things on the site. It's just kind of stayed static. What would be the questions you would want to ask as an agency to help understand and diagnose a problem?
I think often all of us are guilty of putting on whatever blinders we have, right? And so it's easy to say, oh, SEO, well, what's happening let's dig into Search Console, let's dig into your analytics, let's dig into Site Catalyst and figure out what's going on. And you get really specific. Sometimes it's nice to get above the trees and see the whole forest. And so where my mind goes to is SEO is a part of marketing. Any of us that are just like die hard and SEO is everything. It's not. It's one component of an overall strategy or an overall business, right? So it's nice to pull your head up and go, well, what's new with the business in the last year? What's changed? Environmentally, what's changed, right? Is it still... There's almost always something when you take your head up and go, environmentally, what's different? Oh, well, people aren't getting $900 checks for free because of stimulus packages now. So, the magic e-commerce years you had during COVID are not as magical anymore. Let's talk about that. And here's why. Yeah. Or, hey, because of tariffs, this is happening. Or people are scared of the economy and people didn't want to spend money at the end of last year. They all knew what they wanted to do, but nobody wanted to commit until there was a president change, and then all of a sudden people wanted to spend more money all of a sudden. Well, now people are scared of tariffs. So like environmentally, what's changed and what's happened, and is that having an impact on conversion, even if everything with SEO is actually going pretty well? So that's where my mind goes, is just what's happening outside of SEO. And then
I think
inside of SEO, what changes all the time.
Sometimes we come back to the keyword strategy in a sense of just, is it aligned? Because you can drive more traffic. Like that example Dan shared earlier about tables and chairs. Let's say they started ranking for tables and chairs. They're going to drive a lot more traffic from some, random homeowners or whatever that look at it, but they're not maybe going to purchase, right? Because it's not the right fit for commercial. So that in that example, that's something we were able to really dial in, is taken from that really broad keyword strategy. When you go to a tool, it's like, oh, there's a million searches. That sounds great. I want a part of that. Yeah. But by actually niching down to what they do, which was commercial, it's a lot less search volume, but now they actually rank for all that. That's where all the growth came from and the conversions followed. So it's shifting even more now, I'd say, than it ever has. But traffic, I think it's Rand Fishkin talks about this now, that traffic and impression, or sorry, traffic is actually like a vanity metric. It's not really an indication of business, because we've actually seen the opposite with some of the AI stuff, is people's traffic maybe decreasing, but conversion staying the same because they're
Yeah.
just maybe losing the traffic that wasn't converting. And so that's
Hmm.
why where we started off with this is you really need to understand some of that attribution, know where your leads and traffic are actually coming from. And then to Dan's point, what doesn't show up in the spreadsheet basically, right? What are all those other things that
Yeah.
influence purchasing
I
behavior?
love that you mentioned those things totally outside of like content marketing or technical SEO or anything like that. You're like, what are these kind of other factors that could be in there, like our strategy for keywords or the external market factors? Because all of that plays on SEO. SEO is like a microcosm of the world, and it plugs into, yes, your technical SEO and your content and such, but it's a bigger picture. And I love that you're able to look at all of that holistically, because sometimes those are the problems and not so much the SEO part of it. You know, somebody is and saying, wow, this sounds really good. How do I get a hold of Brian or Dan? Where do they find you guys?
Yeah, so just personally, if you want to reach out, touch base, follow, LinkedIn's a great place to, I think, find either of us. And then, of course, our website, bigleap.com. You can learn about, we again wrote a series called The Right Client Agency Fit. If you want to learn a little bit more about maybe how to find the right agency, that's a great
Mm-hmm.
spot. And then, of course, any of our services, and there's contact information on the website as well.
And Jonathan, a big question on a lot of people's minds these right now is AI. How's it impacting things? How's it impacting search? What does this look like? What do I
Yeah.
need to do to make sure I'm showing up when someone's looking for me, maybe in ChatGPT or Perplexity?
Yeah.
And also, you can find a whole section on the website about AI and kind of what we're seeing, what we're doing, kind of impacts that we're seeing on clients. And so, if you have any interest in the AI side of things as well, feel free to kind of peruse the blog. And if anything's interesting, or you feel free to reach out.
Dan and Brian, thank you so much for coming on, sharing some real world experiences and giving the right questions, I think, to those who are listening so they can evaluate, hey, is SEO working for me? Is it worth making the change? And then what are the questions I need to ask in making a good fit with an agency?
Jonathan, thank you for having us on. Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.